We're going to look at data from Mars, Phobos, which is an unusual moon of Mars, Iapetus, the Sun, which has got this SOHO probe looking at it, amongst other ones. There's a new one since SOHO went up. And we're going to ask, are most scientists deliberately ignoring the most intriguing data that's coming back from these probes? Does the data indicate life and intelligence, past or present, elsewhere in the solar system? That's the question I'm posing. I don't. So we're going to start off with a very brief look at lunar anomalies. These are the slides I inserted a few weeks ago. It's curious, but we get something. Actually, somebody wrote to me about this the other day. Even though the moon is the closest to us, we seem to have less interesting pictures about anomalies on the moon than we do from Mars, for example. Here's one that I came across. This is taken, I think, in 1962 from 1967, Lunar Orbiter 3, and you can see how would a crater, which is meant to be either from a volcano of some type or an impact, you know, a large rock hitting it, how can it have an hexagonal shape rather? Very strange. And again, you can go and find that with this image reference on the Space Exploration Resources from Arizona State University. And then we've got this peculiar crater. How could this have formed? Got this little nick at the top here. This is called the Inoculate crater. So again, I can send you the links for that. No clear answers to some of these images. I don't have an answer, but that doesn't look like a standard sort of volcanic eruption. It has a certain symmetry to it down here. And then I came across this one, which was taken by, even India have got a probe going around the moon now. That went up a few years ago. But when I went to look for this image, because I got this image about a year ago, I think it was, and I went back to look for it again recently to check on it, and that original image has now disappeared from the Indian Space Research Archive. I had to get it from the Internet Archive. So it's this strange mound here. It doesn't really look, it's very unusual compared to what other things that you see on the moon. I don't know what it is. So that's just to tell you that there are even anomalies on the moon. Now, you get disinformation about this as well. I'm going to cover some of that disinformation a little bit tonight, forget time. But people like Richard Hoagland have claimed that there are these structures, glass pyramids on the moon and stuff like this. And he bases that on images from the Apollo program. But if you were here a few months ago when I talked about Apollo, I don't believe that Richard Hoagland is telling the truth about Apollo, because I'm pretty sure, 99% sure, they didn't land on the moon with the Apollo program. But that's another presentation, which you can watch online, by the way, if you want. But so we're going to get into this now in more detail by looking at Mars. And you can clearly see a pattern becomes apparent when you look at what they've said about Mars. So just to give you a little bit of information about Mars, the mass is basically 1/10 of the Earth. The volume is about 15% of the Earth. The equatorial radius is about half of the Earth, and the polar radius is also about half of the Earth. So it's about, you can see it's about half the diameter of the Earth. The mean density is 0.713 of what the Earth is, and the surface gravity is about 1/3, a bit over 1/3. Okay? And it's, I think it's slightly further away than Venus. It's the second nearest planet to us. And we're going to look at some of the information about the space probes that have gone to Mars. So over 50 probes have gone to Mars since the 1960s. The first attempt was made in the Russian Marsnik program with Marsnik 1 in 1960, but most of the early attempts failed. Mariner 4 was the first successful probe flyby, and that took place in July 1965. And that was actually covered by this chap I've already mentioned, Richard Hoagland, who runs a website called enterprisemission.com. He does have a lot of very interesting information. But again, I could do easily another half an hour on that guy. There have been over 50 mission attempts, as I said, and the USA and Russia have both sent probes. I think the US have probably sent a few more. The most sophisticated to date is the Curiosity rover, which quite a lot of press about that, and I'll talk about that a bit later. And I will mention what was covered on Richard D. Hall's programme a few months ago. I'll just mention that briefly. That's not the focus of tonight's presentation. And that's one of the earlier Mariner 4 pictures that was returned, very grainy as you can see. So the journey of discovery with Mars, I would argue, starts with Viking 1 and 2, really. They were probes that each consisted of a lander and an orbiter. In other words, something went round the planet and then something that detached from the orbiter and landed on the surface. The mission objectives were to obtain high-resolution images of the Martian surface, characterise the structure and composition of the atmosphere and surface, and search for evidence of life. Right? And I always point out this when I do this presentation. This arm here, which came out of the probe, it was like a long telescopic arm, dug into the soil, withdrew a sample, and then the arm retracted again and dropped the sand into some chemicals to check if there were microbes in the sand. And that arm was designed by a British guy, and he was on Blue Peter, I think, in 1975 or 1976, because I remember watching it. Viking 1 was launched on August 20th, 1975. It takes about a year to get there. And it arrived at Mars on June 19th, 1976. Viking 2 was launched on September 9th, 1975, and arrived at Mars on 8th of July, 1976. Now, bear in mind, the total cost of the Viking project was $1 billion. That's in 1970s money. It's for unmanned probes. It's a very, very expensive mission. Because the Curiosity rover mission, which happened most recently, that was also $1 billion, but that's 35 years later, basically. Now then, that experiment, well, I'm not going to talk, I've got a clip about this later, so I'm not going to talk about the details, but that experiment with the arm, which dug the soil, it claimed to get a positive result. NASA announced they discovered life on Mars in 1976, and I'm going to come back to that shortly. But this was the guy who designed the experiment, which analysed the chemicals in the soil. Gil Levin, Dr. Gil Levin, I'll come back to him. But the other thing that happened was when they got the first pictures, allegedly from the surface of Mars, they looked at these, and you're going to hear this story in a minute as well in a clip that I've got, and the original images they got looked like this. This is according to Richard Hoagland and Dr. Gilbert Levin. But then somebody in NASA Mission Control said, oh, that's not right, and they came round and they adjusted all the monitors and said, yeah, that's better, and they showed this picture on the right. And what you actually find is that if you take the original Viking images, which are available, I don't know if people know how these pictures are made, but a colour image can be made by taking 3 separate pictures, one through a red filter, one through a green filter, and one through a blue filter. So you take 3 black and white pictures, right, through each one of those colours, RGB, ever seen an RGB input on a TV? And then you mix those images together, and it means that with a black and white camera and colour filters you can generate a colour image. And so what this chap did, Holger Isenberg, you can go and look at his website, he downloaded the original black and white images for the Viking images, and he reprocessed them in Photoshop using NASA's filter specification for the red, green and blue filters that they used to take these images, and that was the image he got on the top there. Isn't that strange? And I've seen 3 different analyses saying basically the same thing. So, there was a documentary broadcast in 2009 by the BBC, and it was actually a re-edited repeat of a documentary that broadcast about Viking 30 years earlier. And I've got a clip from that. If it plays. Put the sound, please.
And there's the first piece of information coming in.
Thank you.
Oh. Say something, too. Yeah, I'm supposed to say something at this point. I just don't feel like talking.
Well, there are rocks.
There are rocks, yes. There's rocks, and there's sediment, but it's just incredible to see that the Mars, is really there.
So you can see the black and white images.
It's always a little bit hazardous. Nonetheless, many of these boulders do look very similar to ones that we've seen in desert terrains here. Some of these boulders may be vesicular, that is, basaltic rocks, possibly volcanic rocks that have solidified in a gas-charged environment, and they release gases, produce vesicles or holes. Just looks like a perfect set down.
The first picture of the Martian panorama.
As you look at the field of view in general, I think the most striking impression is one of a lot of rocks. And this automatically brings to mind the fact that we had a good deal of luck, because some of these rocks are about 2-3 meters across, and had the spacecraft landed on those rocks, it would have been disabled, probably permanently disabled.
Later high-resolution pictures confirmed the rocks were volcanic, but lying on dunes of fine sand. On the second day, the first pictures in color. Mars was indeed the red planet, or at any rate, blue red. But the colors were false. It was noticed that one of the cables on the spacecraft wasn't orange enough. The color was corrected, and Mars turned even redder. The reason for their mistake? The sky. Everyone had assumed it would be blue like on Earth. But on Mars, scattered dust turns the sky pink and makes sunsets purple.
And you might have recognised the dulcet tones of William Franklin, who was a popular TV announcer and actor at the time. But something's not right. You'll notice that he said the colour of the cable was too orange. That is false. That is BBC false misinformation. On the Viking probe, they had colour calibration charts fitted to the probe, so that when they took pictures of these, they could tell what the colours should have been when they were viewed from Earth. So it had nothing to do with the colour of cables, right? They needed to disguise the fact that the sky is blue, not red. Now, latterly, some people have argued that that's because the rovers and landers aren't even on Mars. They're somewhere in the Mojave Desert or on Devon Island. I don't know if that's correct or not, but what I can tell you is the sky on Mars ain't red. And also the reason that they give for it being red is bogus, because they say it's due to scattered dust. Yet, because the atmosphere is very thin on Mars, I think it's something like less than 10% of the thickness of the Earth's atmosphere, how is the dust going to stay suspended? Because the air is much thinner. So the dust explanation is also bogus. And again, you can see this happening with some of the later probes. This is from the Spirit rover, which went up in 2004. They did the same thing again. Here, you've got this. This is the panel as was taken on Earth on the test rig. So this is green. This is sort of an orangey colour, brown, and this is blue. This is the key one. When they got this back from Mars, they said it was red. It's impossible, because this is colour by subtraction. So this panel here reflects only blue light. But if you've only got red light coming through the cloud, as they claim, how can red light change into blue? That would be a muddy grey. It wouldn't be red. You can't turn red to blue, not with transmitted light from not from reflected light. It's impossible, because if that was caused by red light, it would be muddy grey, because that's blue. If you see what I mean. So that is false. They're substituting colours. So somebody had done in Photoshop, they changed all the red hues into blue hues. Why would they do that? And then this is a later picture from 28th of July 2005. This isn't a NASA picture, this is an ESA picture, the European Space Agency, which is like the European counterpart to NASA, and I've got a few images from them as well. Excuse me, but why is that blue? That's meant to be ice. Is that reflecting? So is it reflecting the colour of the sky, maybe? I don't know, but that doesn't look right to me. And again, I can send you the link to that picture if you want to look at it. And here we've got two pictures, one from Mars Express, which is the ESA probe, and one from Mars Global Surveyor, which was launched in 1999. It's not Viking pictures, in other words. I'm going to come back to some more Mars Global Surveyor images. What's this here? What's this green? Some people say that NASA has deliberately desensitized the filters on the orbiters to green light. Green is the colour of chlorophyll, which is the material in plants, leaves, grasses, which is responsible for photosynthesis. So why would they want to change it into that? Why do we get all these black and white images from Mars all the time? When everyone's got a high-resolution digital camera in their pocket now, pretty much. Now then, life on Mars was discovered again. So in 1976 they discovered it. Then they claimed it was a mistake. We'll come back to that. In July 2004, it was stated by Professor Vittorio Formisano that Mars Express, this is the ESA probe, so he's not from NASA, had detected ammonium, methane and even formaldehyde in the Martian atmosphere. These are called biomarker gases, indicating ongoing life processes. So that means that these gases have been generated by living organisms. You know, methane, cow farts, for example, has come into the news. Now, this is quoting Formisano. He said, "My observations should not be taken as a statement that there is life on Mars today, because we need to go there to drill the soil, take samples and analyse them before possibly concluding that life is there." I'm sorry, but this is 2004, and I've just told you how in 1976 they sent a probe which dug the soil and analysed the chemicals and detected life. Why would Formisano not mention Viking, a NASA mission? And then, methane on Mars again. NASA, methane clouds could be evidence for life on Mars. 5 years later, they did it again. Levin's experiment in 1976, that actually discovered methane as well. So NASA also keep discovering water. I'll come back to this. But so we've got the same story again 5 years later, reported as if it's a new discovery. Huh? Methane on Mars again. We've had a similar report again on December the 4th, 2012. Curiosity rover detects water and organic compounds on Mars. The rover also detected its first organic compounds in the form of chlorinated methane. Again, reported new again, that's 7 years later. But then they debunk it 13 days later days later, on 13th of December, as Discovery News reports, "Where's Mars's methane? Curiosity doors are blank." So then they say it didn't discover it. Here we go again. September 2013, NASA says there is no life on Mars, in the Daily Mail. And then, December the 16th, 2014, Curiosity detects methane spike on Mars. So they're announcing these discoveries and then unannouncing them. Those are all headlines from either from NASA or Daily Mail or wherever. So these have all gone out to the public. You know, I don't have access to any whistleblowers or any secret information or anything like that. This is all public information. You can see they're playing games here. It's obvious that they're playing games. Now, this video is a combination of two things. You're going to see some moving Martian, I've called them microbes, that's why I put the question mark. This video was made by Ron Bennett, but it was silent. So what I did was I overlaid another chap called David Darling, and he's going to tell you about more about the life detection experiment with the arm, you know, that dug the soil.
I believe that Viking found life, and I think that, maybe not intentionally, but scientists painted the wrong picture of what happened. You know, the message was put out that Viking found nothing more than unusual active chemicals in the soil, that basically Mars was dead. And that's had a profound effect on everything that's followed, including the direction of the whole space program. So the question is, where did things go wrong? Well, back in '76, two identical spacecraft, Viking 1 and 2, landed on Mars. They both carried miniature biology labs, kind of about the size of a microwave oven. It was quite small. But they had 3 experiments which were looking directly for life on Mars, and they were the first spacecraft to do this, and incredibly, the only spacecraft that have ever looked for life on another planet. You know, in the 30-odd years since then, we've never sent out another probe to look for life, and that's because the mainstream science said Viking didn't find anything. So, you know, they carried out some experiments. I just want to zero in a couple of them. One was called the label release experiment. One was called a pyrolytic release. And the agreement was beforehand, if any of these experiments found a positive signal, then we would say that they'd found life on Mars, and that was thrown out the window later on. So what the label release experiment did was it took a sample of Martian soil, it dripped some water onto it, some goodies, some nutrients, kind of like a chicken soup type of thing for bacteria, And the neat thing was that those nutrients were laced with radioactive carbon. And the hope was that any bugs in the soil would metabolize that food and they'd give off radioactive carbon dioxide, which you could then pick up with a radiation detector, Geiger counter. And lo and behold, that's exactly what it found. A big rush of radioactive carbon dioxide, which lasted for about 3 days. Exactly what you'd expect if there were bacteria in the soil. And not what you'd expect if there was a chemical reaction. It wouldn't last that long. There's no way. The other experiment, the pyrolytic release experiment, showed that organic chemicals were manufactured in the soil by something. That's kind of hard to explain without life going on. And these two together gave life signals. So why didn't scientists say that Viking had found life? Because according to the pre-agreed criteria before Viking ever left the launch pad, both of those experiments found life. The reason was there was another instrument on board Viking, which was called the GCMS. That stands for Gas Chromatograph Mass Spectrometer. And the whole purpose of that instrument was to look for organic material, anything containing carbon, basically, in the Martian soil. And that came up negative. It didn't find a single thing. It didn't find a single carbon-containing molecule in the soil. And it was used as a court of appeal, basically. So you've got two experiments saying, yeah, there's life here by pre-agreed criteria. Another instrument says there can't be life, no organics, you can't have life. But that instrument wasn't working properly. And we know it wasn't working properly. It's been demonstrated. It was demonstrated even before Viking took off, although it wasn't really well known or advertised. But in several studies since then, identical equipment to the GCMS been tested on Antarctic soils, on soils from deserts regions on Earth, which are similar to Mars, and it has failed to find life where we know there is life by other instruments. And so this Court of Appeal instrument was faulty. We know it couldn't have detected organic material on Mars, and yet that's the way it panned out, that scientists used that as a way to say there's no life on Mars. So the GCMS found nothing, and so what did the Viking scientists team do? They dismissed the positive readings of the other two experiments. And they said that the activity in the soil was due to some kind of reactive chemical like hydrogen peroxide, and that was that.
So just to summarise what that was showing, as it says there, the Phoenix lander was another lander which went up, I forget the exact date, I think it was 2009, and it landed near the polar regions on Mars, and it worked for about 6 months, and it had a microscope on it, and they drilled it into the rocks, and that's where some of those images came from. Now NASA didn't make those animations. In other words, they didn't take one of the images that was taken and then flip that to another image that was taken of the same field half an hour later. That was done by Ron Bennett, who was an amateur researcher. So you've got amateur researchers doing experiments on NASA's own data that NASA are not doing. This is the problem. And then NASA are just ignoring the results. They're not sort of going along to Ron Bennett and saying, oh yeah, that's really interesting, thanks for doing that. We never thought of that, which is what they should be doing. And then I've just got various images like this, for example. What's this? And there's quite a few of these. I mean, maybe it is just a random collection of rocks. But we're going to see some that perhaps can't be that. And I'm going to come back to these again, but these are, I would agree, fossils in the rocks on Mars. A video about these by the chap who discovered these images. These are all, again, NASA images, but this website's since disappeared. Some of these images have moved around and stuff. But here's the chap, Sir Charles Schultz III. He's going to tell you more about this.
Well, last month, a NASA scientist in Alabama stunned the world when he said he discovered evidence of alien life. His claim was based on fossil remains he supposedly found in a meteorite. The next day, however, NASA said their researchers' work was flawed and unreliable. However, claims of alien life and fossils are nothing new for NASA. For the past 7 years, they've been dealing with the Winsboro man and his research. And his work may very well change our way of thinking forever. Viking probe landed on Mars in 1976, NASA has been trying to find out if life once existed or if it still exists there today. 30 years later, in December of 2006,
today you will hear what many are saying may be the most significant discoveries to date.
NASA scientists released photographs that suggest there is life. Pictures that show water on Mars.
We can honestly talk about liquid water on the surface of Mars today.
The news was reported in the national media and was hailed as a major discovery. The only problem, another man says he made the very same discovery nearly 3 years earlier.
You came to the conclusion that there was water and life on Mars when?
The date when I was first certain of it was February 15th, 2004.
Charles Schultz looks and sounds like a modern-day Einstein. Using the Freedom of Information Act, he obtained more than 200,000 Mars images from NASA. And after thousands of hours of research, he came to some startling conclusions.
Many of the things that I've seen look very clearly like the recent erosion or presence of water, liquid water on the surface, and many of the images show what appear to be fossil organisms, marine fossils.
Right, fossils on Mars, and not just a few. Schultz says the planet is littered with them.
Right now, the planet has extremely thin air, very tough living conditions, but it is wet on the surface in many areas, and it is covered with fossil remains from marine organisms. Some of the fossils we found are seashells, and very clearly they are identical to the things we'd find on the Earth. This is a conch shell, apparently, found on the planet Mars, and this is one on the Earth. And you can see there's an absolute identical appearance to both of them.
Schultz showed me picture after picture.
This is a trilobite fossil.
All NASA images.
Opportunity, the rover found on the 158th day of its imaging.
And all of them compelling.
This clearly looks like water flow to me and mud.
It is.
The rover, the Opportunity, these Mars crafts that have gone up there and literally have gotten stuck in the mud?
In many cases, yes.
Schultz's research has the potential to change the way we think about the universe. He's written numerous articles for scientific magazines and books on the subject. The latest is A Fossil Hunter's Guide to Mars. In it, he carefully lays out his research and conclusions.
NASA explained your findings.
Actually, they've ignored it. In the beginning, when I began posting a lot of my information and sending it to them as well, there was some interest, and my website had hits from 40 to 90% from Mars researchers, NASA particularly, and other countries. But over time, the died off and there was no response. So they actually pretty much ignored what I posted.
NASA Director Charlie Bolden won't speculate on the potential for water or fossils on Mars, but he's hoping the next rover mission, Curiosity, will answer those questions once and for all. It takes off this November. The first data is expected by the fall of next year.
We expect to make discoveries with Curiosity. I don't want to, set great expectations. What we find will be different from what we found before. It will look at the soil of Mars. It's looking for any signs of microbes or microbial life there. It's absolutely incredible what it's going to do.
And when I pressed him on Schultz's claims of fossils on Mars,
I don't know. I wish I could say yes, I do, but I don't know. I really don't.
Bolden referred me to a NASA scientist who's been working on the very same subject.
This activity, especially the fact that it's going on today, to me says that the mid-latitudes of Mars are one of the more remarkable places in the solar system.
Phil Christensen is well known for his work on Mars. Remember that December '06 announcement of water on Mars? Well, Christensen was there, and NASA's conclusions were supported by his research.
NASA's goal, long-term goal, is to land on Mars, collect rocks, and bring them back to Earth so that we can examine them in laboratories here under microscopes and look for any evidence of fossils or any other evidence of ancient life on Mars. I'm very confident that that rover will make discoveries that will really change our thinking. Again, every time we look, we find an interesting place. There were clearly environments on Mars billions of years ago that were very much like the Earth. And, it's very possible that life may have started there. Again, that would be a fantastic discovery, and that could be coming in the next year or so.
I think that they have been ready with this for a very long time. The first researchers on the mirror teams, the rover teams, included an oceanographer. a marine biologist who was looking at the images. And that's very telling in its own right.
Schultz believes disclosure will happen next year once the rover sends images back to Earth. It's something he says could have happened sooner, but didn't because of religious beliefs.
Many people allow their beliefs to dominate regardless of the facts. And it's not a stab at religion. This is just a presentation of the facts. People who have faith find a way to live with the facts.
You're dealing with science.
That's absolutely correct. You have to work with science and facts.
Is there life on Mars right now?
I do believe so, because nothing we know of would have sterilized the entire planet. Funguses, spores, bacteria could very easily still be in the soil today.
Well, despite his research, Schultz says he's not the person who first discovered life on Mars. He said that honor belongs to Viking mission scientist and current Arizona State University professor, Dr. Gary Levin. Levin believes he discovered microbial life from the soil samples taken from the 2 Viking missions from the 1970s. But NASA has never embraced those findings. Well, a huge announcement from NASA today. Their scientists believe water is flowing on the surface of Mars, and it's believed to be salt water, which could still theoretically sustain life. NASA says striking new images from the mountains of Mars may be their best evidence yet of flowing liquid water. Those images appear to show some sort of water flow on the Mars surface. Now, if true, NASA says this has profound implications in the search for extraterrestrial life. But today's NASA announcement is nothing new for a Winsboro man. Charles Schultz has been studying the so-called red planet for years, and back in April, he told News 19 viewers that there's microbial life and water on Mars. He believes NASA has known this for years and is releasing the information a little at a time.
Little by little, the information is being given to the public to sort of prepare them for what's to come. The flow of water and the creation of mud is very common on the planet Mars, even today. And this mud flow is terraced. It's in layers, just as you'd expect in any place where the water's flowed. You can see how it's moved around here. And this is actually the geyser that probably was the source of that water. For 45 years, we believed Mars to be as dry as the moon, and yet constantly we're given information that tells us that's not so. It's loaded with water and mineral resources. It's another planet just like the Earth.
And if you remember our story back in April, Charles tried to give NASA his findings, and they basically wouldn't listen to him.
So how many people have heard of fossils on Mars before this presentation? So we've got about 4 people in the room. But yeah, that information is all there, because Charles Schultz is a scientist, not a NASA scientist, but he has worked as a scientist in another, actually for Marietta Airspace. So why don't we get that information given to us? You know, American taxpayers paid for it, but you're not told about it. So that to me is the definition of a cover-up, or one definition of a cover-up. And then you get interesting images like these, of which there are quite a number now. And I don't claim to have a monopoly on these, you know. Most of these have come off other people's websites. I haven't really discovered any of these, particularly. So what about this? I mean, this bottom picture here is actually a fossilised spine of some type of creature, I think. I'm not sure if it's a reptile or what it is. But then you see on Mars, you've got this image here, where you've got these rocks that are sort of bending at an angle and pointing upwards. And it actually does look like some bones. You can see it a bit more clearly in this image. It's not a random rock formation. Okay, so we're now going to look at some more large-scale anomalies, and we'll go on for a bit longer and we'll have a break in a bit. Much attention has been focused on a region of Mars called Cydonia, which I'm going to mention a little bit more about in a while. But Arthur C. Clarke, he has stated his beliefs that, and he's now passed on, the discovery, we'll come back to him later actually, on 6th of June 2001, he said, "I'm quite serious when I say have a really good look at these new Mars images," Clarke said. "Something is actually moving and changing with the seasons. That suggests at least vegetation," he said. Clarke repeated several times that he was serious about his observations, pointing out what he sees as something akin to banyan trees in some Mars Global Surveyor photos. So what are these things here? He says that they're banyan trees. But if you look at James Rice, a planetary geologist at Arizona State University, they say most of the images in question that I looked at are of dunes in the polar regions. They are beginning to defrost as winter draws to a close. The sand composing the dunes is dark and the frost is bright, thereby causing the spotted pattern as the dune defrosts. This is not vegetation, but rather the natural defrosting of dunes and sand sheets. Oh, really? Well, I don't buy it. Sorry, Mr. Rice. Now, I've got quite a long clip here. This is basically similar to the fossils clip. I'm not going to play all of it. Well, I'm probably not going to play it actually, because it's take about another 10 minutes. Basically, this chap, Alan Moen, another independent researcher, he studied primarily these 5 images from Mars Global Surveyor, and he was looking at these strange rings. And what he did was, he worked out the position of the Sun on Mars, on the Martian surface, and he worked out, you know, the heights of these dunes and so forth, and he built a computer model of the terrain. And then he illuminated that computer model with simulated sunlight, and he basically found that these were actually shadows of varying kinds created by trees. That was what his computer model shows. And he goes into detail in this in a 10-minute video. And again, most of this is online, so I can send links to anybody who wants them. And then you get other strange images as well. This is an ESA image, and this is called terracing, where things appear in layers here. These are 2 images of this region. I forget the name of the actual region. But look at this region here, for example. These sort of squiggles here. I don't know how well you can see it at the back, but this is a Kalgoorlie gold mine in Australia. Can anyone see the similarity in this terracing here? It's an ESA image of Mars. So what's going on? Is it just a coincidence that it happens to look like mining operations? Maybe it is. I don't know. NASA won't talk about it, neither will ESA. And this is an intriguing one I came across a little bit more recently. Anyone ever heard of a COFUN? I'd never heard of a COFUN until I came across this. This is a COFUN here. It's actually like a keyhole-shaped object. It's actually a type of burial mound that you find in Japan. And this is a sort of relief model of one from, it's in one of these sort of tourist national parks in Japan. And this is like a relief map of the COFUN, and you can see this sort of keyhole shape here. Well, this one, I've got the NASA link there, that's a Mars high resolution image, taken I think in 2009 or by Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. And you can see it's got this keyhole shape on Mars. So anyone find that rather surprising? I do. NASA won't talk about it though. And I sent this one to somebody else as well. I've got 2 images I'm going to show you now. And I measured this. You can work out how big this image is. That long line there is 3 miles long. That's probably about, I don't know, 2.5 miles long. How come you're getting these 2 things intersecting at right angles? There's the image number. Go Google it. SP24 3004 MGS. You can find it yourself on the US Geological Survey website. Now, we come to this one, the one I mentioned on BBC Radio Humberside last week, and mentioned it lots of times before. And this is the older version. This, I think, was taken in 1999. This is the older black and white version. I've still not been able to get any information on this image beyond the image number. I've never seen any NASA commentary on it. No one's ever written to me about it to say, oh, Andrew, you know, I know what it is, here's the explanation. I don't know what it is, but I can guess. I think it's one of those. Anyone heard of Buckminster Fuller? Yeah. Geodesic dome? Might not be, but that's what it looks like to me. And I came across this that somebody had posted on the forum. This is the McMurdo Station at the South Pole, half geodesic dome. And obviously you can see it's partially covered in snow here. It's an odd similarity, isn't it? Very strange. Doesn't prove that that's what it is, but it's an odd similarity. I was quite interested in that. What about this? Regularly spaced slats. I just called it the caterpillar. NASA don't give a name to it. What the hell is it? That's 1.3 miles, that dimension there, or 2.1 kilometres. And it's actually just down, as you're going to see in a minute, from the golf ball image. It's just about, it's a couple of miles away from that. What the hell's going on here with all this stuff here? So let's have a little look, shall we? hear me saying this a few times tonight, but there is a story here we are not being told. I don't know what that story is, but we are not being told it. Here is another example of us not being told this story. Now, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter took a new image of the dome with a high-resolution camera on 10th February 2008. It was posted on a page hosted by the University of Arizona. Here's a copy of that page. Notice the description here. It says, you may not be able to read it at the back, but it says, crater with textured mound in central Acidalia planitia. And the image reference is PSP 007230_2170, if you want to go and look for it. Now, as you may have heard me say on BBC Radio last week, I had this image as my Skype image, and various things. And I was talking to my brother on Skype, and he saw this thing pop up when I answered the call from him or whatever. And he says, "What the hell's this?" And I said, "Oh, that's on Mars. Do you want to go and look at the image?" And well, all right. So I sent him this link here at the bottom, and he clicked on it, and this is what came up. It says, crater with textured mound in central Acidalia planitia. So he says, "I can't see what you're looking at." And I went, "Oh, can't you?" So I went and clicked on it, and that's the image I got. You can see, same heading, same image number. But what they've done is, they've taken that off. In other words, the most interesting and arresting image from anywhere in the solar system has been, they haven't deleted it. If you go down to these links at the bottom here, and download the images, you'll find that, you can zoom in and you can find that again. But why are you doing that? Why are you taking off this headline image? Well, to me, the answer is simple. It's a cover-up. It's to stop people asking questions. Simple as that. And here's just a larger version of it. And you can see with this high-resolution image, you can still see the spherical nature in this apparent, looks to me like a tube going out of the top here. But we don't know what this encrusting is. It looks like some crystalline growth of some kind, or hardwood rock or something. But there's no explanation for this. I've not heard anybody in NASA explaining this. Who else has never seen this image before? Anyone seen this image before apart from... Hardly anyone. Few people have seen it, but probably on my website and stuff. And it's on forums as well, a few of them. And again, just zoomed in. And there's a higher resolution of this caterpillar thing. And the regular spacing, I don't know what these are, but they look like sort of segments or spines or something. What the hell's going on? Nobody's telling us. So, back in 2004, I decided that I would write to some geologists. And all I did was I copied and pasted the T image and the golf ball image, that's all, just like that, without any links, nothing. Put them in an email, chose 42 geologists at random, and sent these images off to them. I wrote to the Beagle 2 team, which was about to land on Mars at the time, and the response I got back was, "They look like longitudinal dunes to me. It would be nice to get the topography, but Mars Express will only have about 1/3 of the resolution at this latitude." All these are natural faces, as with the face, which I didn't even mention, which was subsequently shown to be a collection of hills, because it wasn't. The human mind is, of course, pre-programmed by evolution to identify patterns and assimilate them into pictures we recognise. More data is required of such features to fully identify. Yes, well, of course. That's what the probes are for, isn't it? To get more data. That's what I thought they were for. Oh, it's got slightly overlaid. But anyway, I wrote to these geologists, and the key one that came out, which is kind of typical really, there were 3 people that responded out of the 42. This is just a message that I sent. Sent him the images, and he said, "I don't know what they are, where are they from, what are they? I don't even know." So I sent him the links to usgs.gov and msss.com, which is the Mammalian Space Science Systems website, which is a private company which manages the images for NASA. It's a private company. I sent him those 2 links. And the response I got back from the geologist, an associate professor of geology, "These 2 images from the surface of Mars are certainly puzzling and have been floating around at UFO web pages for some time. I am sorry, but I do not believe in big conspiracy theories and that the government is trying to hide something from us concerning Mars or any other planet. That wasn't what I asked him. I asked him, what did the images show? I sent him links to the USGS website, which is a website he should be familiar with. I'm not really bothered that they've been on a UFO website. So what? And then at the end of his message he says, good luck with your investigations. What, you mean you're not interested in this as a geologist? And this is the attitude you get. Because when they look at something in the face where they're going to have to shatter their paradigm, they've got two choices. They run away or they take it on. And now we're going in for a little bit of light-hearted, because this is going back a few years now, but it's actually 2008, because a lot of this stuff has been on my website for 7 years or more now, quite a long time, and on others. I don't claim the credit for this. I didn't really find any of these images. I perhaps talked about them a little bit more than a few other people have. But somebody from NASA, this is from, let's see, where was it? Florida, Cape Canaveral, there you are. Somebody from Cape Canaveral, right, Googled or searched for searcher.al news, life on Mars, that was their search terms, and they ended up on my website. So how's that? News, life on Mars, brings NASA to my website. That's a joke. It's a total joke. And then again, this one was even sweeter, because this was the Marshall Space Flight Center. I don't know what they searched for, but they came to an article which I got about some of these images, and they clicked out on that image. They never emailed me to explain what they were. No one from NASA has emailed me to say that I'm wrong. So we can see that they won't talk about certain of these images. And they're there for you to look at if you want, but you won't get an answer out of NASA about them. Yeah, and there's plenty of films like this if you look for them. Particularly, we've got Martin Stubbs to thank for a lot of these. He basically downloaded or intercepted some of the images that were coming from the space shuttle between about, it was early 90s or late 80s. And he actually found things like this. This isn't a very good quality copy, but you can get better copies on the internet. What's this thing going off here, look? You'll see it zoomed in. This has been on the TV, this actually. I'm not, again, I haven't discovered this. There's a guy called Jack Casher did an analysis. That's space debris changing direction in response to something being shot from the ground. And there are several images like that as well. There's this one as well, for example. What's this thing here? This is a low quality. You can get a better quality image than this. This is NASA footage, folks. You can find this in David Sarida's film, NASA, The Case for NASA UFOs. And that's on YouTube as well. What's going on with this thing here? Why did it suddenly light up? This is taken in UV, ultraviolet. That's a camera that's sensitive to ultraviolet light. So we know that they're hiding stuff. You can clearly see it. This is another rover image. No time to airbrush this one. There's the image reference for you, if you want it. It's on JPL's website, Jet Propulsion Lab. This was a couple of years ago, February 5th, 2013. Looks like somebody's handlebar sticking out of the rock. I think it's quite small. I think it's only about 2 inches long or something. It's very small, this image. But what is it? Weird shiny thing. No answers from NASA. It looks like some type of construction that's partly exposed. What is it? I don't know. Again, image reference. I checked on the JPL website. There it is at the bottom, very small for you to read, but I can give it to anyone who wants it. And then this was on Joe Skipper's website. That's a bit of a mixed bag. MarsAnomalies.com. It's a bit of a mixed bag, that site, but this is one of the very interesting ones that I found on there. What the hell is this? Again, it looks like some shaped piece of rock. I don't know, is it just something that's sheared off? I don't know. Very peculiar with this sort of, something that appears to have either been sculpted or it almost looks like it's dripped. Perhaps it looks like part of the sculpture. But again, that's on mars.nasa.gov. And this image we talked about on Richard Hall's programme late last year. So this is an original capture and release of the image. Cylindrical projection view combines several frames from the navigation camera on NASA's Mars Exploration Rover Opportunity. And it was taken on the 115th Martian day of Sol, May 21st, 2004. Nice panorama, but what's this? It's like a plank of wood to me. Might not be, could be something else, and apparently somebody's come out and said it is actually a layer of sedimentary rock or something, but it's sure doesn't look like that to me. And then the other thing which you heard, we talked about this in Charles Schultz's video. What's these ridges here? Well, that's surface moisture. There is liquid water on the surface of Mars. Scientists are intrigued by the marks on Spirit's airbags left on the surface. This is from 2004. The soil shows an unusual cohesiveness, almost as if the soil grades were stuck together like mud. Steve Squires is also puzzled. He's the mission commander, well, not mission commander, but he's head of the mission. The way in which the surface has responded is bizarre. It looks like mud, but it can't be mud. So it isn't. So forget about it. NASA told them there was water in 1979. This is a caption from their image. I can give you the link. This colour image, with the wrong colour sky of course, a thin layer of water ice frost on the Martian surface at Utopia Planitia. That was from 1979. So why are they talking about water on the surface being a big deal? Okay, they said liquid water, but so what? It's still water, that's the key thing. And that's a corrected image, I would say. Is it Devon Island? Maybe we've been through this with the other video. This is the close-up of the water-related mud and so forth. Now then. This is just another little short video clip. I think I'll go maybe a few more minutes and then I'll have a break. I'm now going to give anybody, this is a slightly strange one, I've got a little clip of, you can't really call it music, this is only about a minute long video, but anybody who knows what this music is from gets a free DVD of their choice, if you ask me, either in the interval or after the end of the talk. Right? So listen to this, can't call it music, see if you know what it's from. I'll sing afterwards.
Someone else.
What are these things in the sky? Mars is meant to be an uninhabited world with no life. Flying saucers don't exist. You can find these images on the NASA website. The links are shown at the bottom of the image references. Again, I can't claim any credit for discovering those. I've just collected them when I've seen them on various websites. Because a lot of these images are available in these huge databases now, you know, there are people that are poring over them day and night to find stuff like that. So I'm very grateful to those people for finding the good ones. Again, you go onto YouTube and you find a mixed bag of stuff, and people claim to see, you know, like dinosaurs and, you know, all kinds of stuff on the surface, which I don't buy into. And they'll recolour it and they'll, you know, sort of compress it and decompress it and da-di-da. But no, these are the really obvious ones. Now, this is another interesting image. Again, don't really know what it shows. This was on Richard Hoagland's website originally. This is a Pathfinder image. That was another probe that went up to Mars in 1997. And we've got this strange collection of rocks here. And he has proposed, I don't know if this is true, but it's certainly intriguing, that this is a sphinx, and there's the headdress, the face, and maybe the paws. Might be just a random pile of rocks. But it sure is an interesting image. So make of it what you will. Well-known figures speak out about Mars, and there are a few of them.
I have seen a highly classified report that has not been released publicly, and it probably won't be unless you consider my talking about it here to be releasing it publicly. It's top secret report, codenamed the Gore Report. It was prepared by scientists from Area 52 in New Mexico. They analyzed the Mars data. And there are some findings in this report, and I can understand why they don't want to release this, but I want to, and I don't know it all, but I want to pass off what some of the Gore report says. There was life on Mars. That's what NASA is not being upfront about. There was life. Everybody knows it. We can't be the only people occupying the universe. It's impossible. Who do we think we are? We're the only people God created? And sorry, for those of you who don't believe in God, only people who evolved from apes? So it's clear that there was life elsewhere, and now that NASA's kind of let the cat out of the bag, if there were habitable conditions up there, we know there was life there. In fact, they found some DNA evidence up there that compares favorably to members of the Skull and Bones Society here on Earth. These people were highly industrialized, the Martians. They were technologically superior, and they were very arrogant people. And they thought that the power and the force of their existence was all that was needed to sustain them.
So that contained obvious disinformation, such as to say the DNA was similar to that of members of the Skull and Bone Society, which is ridiculous, because that Skull and Bone Society is not drawn from one family, it's drawn from, high performers in society. Yeah. So, yeah, Yale and so forth. And, so that was ridiculous. And Area 52, he just made that up. But this is Rush Limbaugh, who's he doesn't usually talk about this stuff. He's a political commentator, sort of like a conservative version or a Republican version of Jeremy Paxman, who has a conservative bias. So why was he talking about this stuff on Mars? Life having come from there. 13th of December 2007, Daily Mail reports the Pope condemns the climate change prophets of doom. Don't get me talking about climate change. And this was Australian Cardinal George Pell, who's come in for some flack more recently, I think, over allegations of paedophilia, I believe. And he said, George Pell did, I must admit to being surprised at the use of the industrial military complex up on Mars can't be blamed for the climate change on Mars, because they've monitored climate change on Mars as well. What's he on about? Why would he say this industrial military complex up on Mars can't be blamed for the climate change on Mars? Why would he publicly say that? Very strange. Very strange. And now this one was discovered by David Percy. I've just animated it. This was his image on the right, overlaying these two things. I made this myself by getting an image from the satellite view in Google, and then I overlaid this with a NASA image and made them the same size, using image resize in PaintShop Pro, and that's what you get. So at the bottom here, this is Silbury Hill. That's Silbury Hill there. This is the ditches around Avebury, and then you've got this feature here, here, you'll see it coming in. How come these features align geographically?
What's the ratio? Because they have the same size.
14 to 1. 14 to 1. So what's 1 mile on the Earth is 14 miles on Mars. There is a story here we are not being told. I don't claim to know what that story is, but there is a story here we are not being told. And I don't know the reason why we're not being told it either. Now, I think we'll go to the break after this. some of you here may have seen the programme that we did with Richard D. Hall in, I think it was September or October, we showed that last year, where we discussed the possibility that the Mars Curiosity rovers and perhaps the other rovers are not on Mars. And if you think about it, if that's correct, it would explain why the sky is blue and why they need to cover that up, and it would explain why some of those images are showing fossils, because they're not fossils from Mars, they're fossils from Earth, because the rover's not on Mars. And it would explain why they're trying to cover certain things up, or why they won't talk about certain things. I still have a problem because we've got two separate programs. We've got the lander programs and we've got the orbiter programs. So are all the orbiter pictures fake as well? You know, I'm still thinking about that. But one thing I would say, if you go and watch the Curiosity press conference, right, from August 2012, it's on YouTube, it's only about an hour long. It's very peculiar. Quite a few of the scientists can't answer the questions. They can't answer the questions. It's very odd. So, I'm going to have a break after this slide. Summary for the evidence of life on Mars. There are non-natural structures on Mars, I would argue. Surface water ice was photographed 26 years ago in some detail. Dr. Gil Levin, the creator of Viking Life Detection Experiment, says his experiment worked. There is evidence of biomarker gases being present in the Martian atmosphere. There is some evidence that photos that NASA has presented to the public have not always shown the appropriate colours. So there's either life on Earth or there's life on Mars, or possibly both. A number of the recent rover pictures show evidence of soil moisture. Some rover pictures appear to be following close analysis to show fossils. And other statements, but argued from less reliable sources, speak of a civilization on Mars. I haven't even talked about that. But the media never, this is clear, the media never really focused down on the discoveries of water and methane, and have essentially repeated the same stories roughly every 4 years. That's what you've seen here, and you can go and find those reports for yourself. And doubtless you'll see a report in another year or two saying they've discovered water again or methane or some step slightly on from that. And they won't talk about the dome. So I think we're going to have a break there, and then we'll talk about Phobos when we come back. By the American astronomer Asaph Hall in 1877, and it's named after one of the sons of Ares, the Greek counterpart of the Roman god Mars. Phobos is a small, irregular rocky object with a crater-scarred grooved surface, a roughly ellipsoidal body. Phobos measures 26.6 kilometres, that's 16.5 miles across, at its widest point. It revolves once around Mars every 7 hours, 39 minutes, at an exceptionally close mean distance of 9,378 kilometres, that's 5,827 miles. And it's in a nearly circular orbit that lies only 1 degree from the planet's equatorial plane. It's in an equatorial orbit, which is very unusual. I don't know if I've left my little PowerPoint clicker at the back somewhere there, but if we can see it, we can bring it up if we can find it. I can manage without it, but it's just handy to have it. Okay, so these are just NASA images. We've got Phobos on the left here, and you can see, if you zoom into this, I haven't got to zoom in on this, but you can actually see here things going at right angles. You've got these lines intersecting at right angles. And this object, as I say, is only 16.5 miles in length, so it's quite small. Vesta is the second largest and brightest asteroid of the asteroid belt, size equivalent to a sphere with a diameter of 526 kilometres. So you can see similar lines along the equator there. What's causing these lines? Some people would argue that it's actually what's happening is rocks landing on the surface and rolling around and scraping the surface, because Phobos has what they call microgravity. Because it's such a small object, it's got very weak force of gravity. I don't know where that thing's gone. It's in my pocket. Put it down somewhere. Later. And is Phobos hollow? This Russian scientist, Samuilovich Slotsky, thank you, calculated the orbital motion of the Martian satellite Phobos and came to the jaw-dropping conclusion that the moon is artificial, hollow, and basically a Titanic spaceship. But Shklovsky was not the first one to believe this. First to put this forward, his ideas that the Martian moon Phobos, generally accepted as a celestial body, actually may be an artificial satellite launched long ago by an advanced Martian race, was Dr. S. Fred Singer, special advisor to President Eisenhower on space developments. No mention was made of the other Mars moon, Deimos, however. So isn't that strange that somebody, this was in the 60s, I forget when this chap, 63 I think it was, 1960s, someone else, 1963, Raymond H. Wilson, Chief of Applied Mathematics at NASA, joined Shklovsky and Dr. Singer in their Martian conclusions. He stated that Phobos might be a colossal base orbiting Mars. Isn't that interesting? 1963, well, let's fast forward. Precise mass determination and the nature of Phobos. That was the name of this letter by T. Piander to P. Rosenblatt, M. Paxold, B. Horsler, V. Dehant, G. L. Tyler and J. C. Marty. It was received December 3rd, 2009, revised 8th March 2010, accepted for publication 22nd March 2010, published 7th May 2010, Geophysical Research Letters, Vol 37, L09202. So this is a scientific journal that this was published in. We conclude, in their letter, that the interior of Phobos likely contains large voids, large holes, large spaces. It's hollow. When applied to various hypotheses bearing on the origin of Phobos, these results are inconsistent with the proposition that Phobos is a captured asteroid. That means it didn't naturally come into orbit around Mars. Someone put it there. Well, they don't say that, but that's an alternative explanation. Now, a lot of people sort of latched onto this story in the 60s, and then later on, 1992, we had this story came out, the demise of Phobos 2. They said that the Russian Phobos 2 probe was going towards Phobos. It intended to land on the surface, fire a laser beam at the surface, take a sample, and find out what it was made of. And then this picture was widely circulated at the time, that this was a beam, or a missile being fired from Phobos towards the probe, and then about 20 minutes after that picture was taken, the probe failed and they never heard from it again. And that was a story, I'm not going to read it all out because it goes on quite a long time, but this was by Don Eckert, UFO Magazine, Volume 7, Issue 01, 1992. It's been widely circulated, that story, but they suggested that this thing was a UFO, this missile, or it was a missile or something. But if you actually look at the sequence of images in their original form, not in a sort of rough photocopy, I've got an animated GIF here. This isn't a missile, it's a digital artifact. It's some type of error in the camera sensor or some slight overload. You see, it always stays in the same place. Remember, this probe is moving at high speed, as is Phobos, but this thing is staying in the same place. You're getting static noise and stuff, and so forth. So this is a digital artifact. It's not a missile. Why the probe failed, we don't know. But to go around saying that this was a missile fired from Phobos because it's a space station, it's not that. It wasn't a missile. Phobos might be a space station, but it doesn't look like, in this case, this was the cause of the failure of this probe. And then they also claimed that there was this image of, a strange image of a disc-shaped object on the surface of Mars. That was photographed around the same time as this. But this is actually the shadow of Phobos. And this image is available on the ESA website, and that's what it is. This is what because Phobos is very close to Mars, it casts quite a big shadow on the surface. And that's an example of it there. And then you get the good old bastion of British and indeed now global psychological operations, the Daily Mail, who appear to be playing a very strong role in putting some of this stuff out there, mixing it round, stirring the crap up, and seeing what falls out in people's minds. That's what basically the Daily Mail is doing. It produced this story in 2009, which I've got a clip about. Buzz Aldrin stokes the mystery of the monolith on Mars. And what you'll actually find is, these images were shown on this article, And I've got some more on this on the next slide, and you'll see this wasn't quite as they had it. But here's the actonaut and liar, Buzz Aldrin, who I talk about in other presentations. Could have been a used car salesman. He talked about this. Let's see if it comes up. Are you going to work for me? Give it a minute. Try that again, no? Have some sound, please?
Sorry. Sorry. Very important.
Don't when you're ready.
Yeah. Habitation on the moon. We can visit other people with their habitation. We can keep track. If there's something very important to be developed from the moon, I'm not sure what it is right now. And I sure think we should identify what it is for America to make such gross expenditures again for human habitation on the moon. We can help. We can join with. Together, we can explore the moon and develop the moon. We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there.
So why is Buzz Aldrin coming out and talking about this monolith on Phobos? What's he on about? It's like he's just dangling this carrot out there for people. Well, actually you'll find that there's a number of these monoliths, or so it seems. But the Daily Mail article that I was going to mention the extra details about, this article actually muddled together two completely different pictures of monolithic objects, one from the surface of Mars and one from Phobos. They didn't make that clear in the article. This is exactly what the Daily Mail does. It doesn't properly distinguish the details, and sometimes it just puts information that's completely false. So let's have a look at some of these monoliths in a bit more detail. Seems we might have more than one. And that image, as you see, I think 1998 it was taken, so it's not a new image. So what's going on? Why are they only starting to report this like 9 and 10 years after it was taken? And then again, we got two more images of this, something which was probably the same object or something which looked similar, but this time in colour and high resolution. Here's the image numbers from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and I made this into a little video so you can see where it was on this. In 2008 this was taken, 10 years later. I'd bet some money on the idea that there are people who know more than we know about what these are, and what Phobos is or was. This is the other monolith which we saw in the Daily Mail article. This is actually not on Phobos, it's in Valles Marineris, which is on the surface of Mars. Here's the wide view, and the monolith is in this area, and here it is. This is the one that you saw, which does look like the 2001 monolith. Very strange that, eh? We'll come back to monoliths a bit later. This one, don't know what this was. I couldn't find the NASA image for this. I'm not saying the Daily Mail faked it. I wouldn't put it past them, but I couldn't find the image reference for this one. So now we're going to take a trip a bit further out in the solar system and see what's out there. On the planet Saturn, we've seen some mysterious things. For example, we saw these spokes in the ring system, according to the Voyager images, which came back in the 1980s. But when the Cassini probe got there in 2003, these spokes disappeared. And this has become a little bit more known about. There's quite a lot made of this now, that this may be something to do with sacred geometry, hyperdimensional energy, energy coming from another dimension. This is persistent. You can still see this in images of Saturn today. This persistent hexagonal feature. I think I can't remember if it's the north or the south pole of Saturn. This has been photographed multiple times. This video was released 8 years ago now, this one. And these storms appeared in December 2010. These massive storms, bigger than the Earth. What's causing these changes? So, just linking in briefly to climate change, climate change is not just happening on the Earth, it's happening in all the planets, if you look at the data from NASA and ESA. So, climate change is another lie. Hardly anybody talks about planetary changes when they talk about climate change, because climatologists are not interested in astronomy. So they don't even look at the data. And this is a high resolution of the hexagon image, which was taken 2 and a bit years ago. Again, just the image references there. So what is this? What exactly is it? They claim to have explained this as some type of standing wave. I have seen a YouTube video with some fluid in a tank where it's stirred at a certain rate, and they introduce it at certain points and this sort of thing. So, but do NASA airbrush images? Yes, they do. Here's the evidence. Now, what they basically said with this, I won't read out the whole article, but this was from Saturn, or the Saturn system. This is Titan in the background, and this, I think, is Dione. This grey-coloured moon is Dione, and this is Titan. The sort of browny-orange coloured moon is Titan, which has an atmosphere, largely of methane, I think. And if you increase the contrast on this image, and again the image numbers at the bottom, you can see that somebody has got, you can see the Photoshop brush marks. And what some people have claimed is that they were obviously covering up a spaceship or a UFO or something like that. The official explanation is that they did this as a composite image because they were done with different exposures. This was very bright and this was very dim, or the other way round. So they couldn't capture it as a single image, and they did a composite to make it look nice. So, well, fair enough, if they want to make it look nice, sure, but make sure you tell us exactly what you're doing and how the image is created. And then this was discovered in May 2014. Rolf Olsen revisited earlier Voyager data and did a high-resolution composite of the atmosphere of Neptune, and this is one of the moons, I think, Triton, yeah, that little crescent there is Triton. This again is a composite image made in high resolution, made from I think about 100 images or something. And you can see here, he found this hexagon. So Neptune has a hexagon in its atmosphere too. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it certainly appears to me to be something to do with some impinging energy of some kind, which is not really that well explained right now. But again, that again was found by an amateur researcher. And let's see, yeah, I'm going to play the Saturn video now. I'm going to skip over that one and go on to the next one. Now, I'm not so sure about this book. I'm a bit sort of neutral on it. This has been gone around the internet quite a lot recently. You can get a PDF of it for free. Ringmakers of Saturn by Norman R. Berggren. Now, he was a NASA scientist. He worked on one of the optical teams for the Voyager probes, I think. And he's greatly enlarged the Voyager images with an optical method, not a digital method. And he thinks he's found these objects in the rings which are actually helping to build the ring system. That's why he's called it Ringmakers of Saturn. And this was a video, I didn't make this video, it's about 3 minutes long. Some of the weird stuff that's been picked up on Cassini images. So these are all images from the Cassini probe. Quite a lot of these he does put the numbers on. They're not all shown. Some of the later ones. These are all the image numbers there.